You look at Durham and you think you know what you're seeing, right? A magnificent cathedral, a mighty castle, a beautiful winding river. It's the classic picture postcard English city. But don't let that charming scenery fool you. For nearly 800 years, this was the heart of a hidden kingdom, a place where the lines between faith, power, and law were completely redrawn. And that begs a pretty wild question.
I mean, it sounds like something out of a fantasy novel, doesn't it? But here in Durham, this wasn't fiction. This was the political reality for centuries. It just completely flips our whole understanding of medieval England on its head. So how on earth was this even possible?
Well, this quote just says it all. This is from the bishop's own steward back in 1302. And listen, he's not exaggerating for effect. This was a statement of fact. Up in the north of England, the Bishop of Durham's authority was absolute. And his crown? It was his bishop's mitre.
This incredible system gave rise to a totally unique class of rulers known as the prince-bishops. I mean, think about it. There were warrior priests, they were politicians, they were spiritual guides, all rolled into one. And what they created was, well, basically a semi-independent state right in the middle of England.
And what's so fascinating is how this all got started. It wasn't some bishop making a power grab. Nope. It was a calculated, strategic decision. After the Norman conquest, William the Conqueror had this huge problem. That wild, rebellious border with Scotland. His solution was pure genius. He decided to grant a bishop unprecedented, almost king-like powers to act as a buffer, a holy warrior to defend his northern frontier.
And we're not talking about just token powers here. This was the real deal. The prince-bishops could literally mint their own coins, with their own family crests on them. They could raise their own armies to go fight the Scots. They ran their own courts, where the king's laws just didn't apply. And they could tax people, without even asking London. For all intents and purposes, these guys were kings of their own little kingdom.
Okay, and just look at how long this lasted. We're talking from 1075 all the way to 1836. That is more than 750 years. This wasn't some weird, brief blip in history. It was a fundamental part of English politics, stretching from the deep medieval period right up to the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. Just incredible.
So, if you have that kind of power, and you have it for that long, how do you show it? Well, in Durham, the answer was simple. You write it in stone. The city's architecture itself became this massive statement, a monument to the prince-bishop's one-of-a-kind authority.
All right, so to really get why Durham Cathedral is so special, you just need to know the basics. First, you had Romanesque architecture. Think heavy, thick, fortress-like walls. Then came Gothic, all about soaring height, elegance, and light. Well, Durham Cathedral? It's basically the pivot point, the missing link right between these two epic styles. And this is the brilliant part. The builders at Durham had a massive problem. How you put a fireproof stone roof on a building this huge without it all collapsing? Their solution was something called the pointed rib vault. Now, they did it out of pure necessity. It was an engineering fix, not a design choice. But in solving that problem, they accidentally invented the key technology that would define all of Gothic architecture for the next 400 years. A stroke of genius born from just trying to solve a problem.
So while the cathedral was a fortress for God, right next door, the castle was the fortress for the bishop. It's perched up on this rocky cliff, the perfect seat of power. And this number, well, it tells you everything you need to know. 0. In all its time as a fortress, Durham Castle was never, ever taken by force.
But it's not all about grand statements of power. If you look a little closer, the stones of Durham are packed with these amazing secrets, with legends and strange little details that tell a much more human story.
Take this thing, for example, the sanctuary knocker. It looks amazing, but it was so much more than a fancy door handle. In the medieval world, this bronze face was a literal lifeline. It was a real, physical symbol of the church's power over the state, a legally binding promise of mercy.
And there was a whole system. Imagine you're fugitive. You run to the door, you grab that knocker. A bell rings, monks come out, and they give you this special black robe. Just like that, you're safe. You get 37 days of asylum inside the cathedral grounds. After that, you get a choice. Face your trial, or they'll escort you to the coast so you can escape the kingdom forever.
You know, for a city built on such immense power, its origin story is surprisingly humble. The legend goes that monks had been carrying the body of St. Cuthbert for over 100 years, trying to keep it safe from Vikings. And how did they find this perfect defensive spot? A local milkmaid told them she'd lost her brown, or dun, cow, and it had wandered up here. It's such a charming story for such a formidable place.
Okay, now, take a really good look at this courtyard. I have a hunch, even if you've never set foot in Durham, you've seen this place. Probably in a, let's say, a more magical setting.
Yep, you guessed it. These ancient cloisters, they became the hallways of Hogwarts in the first Harry Potter movies, and the chapter house was turned into Professor McGonagall's classroom. And it doesn't stop there. More recently, the huge main nave of the cathedral stood in for Asgard in Avengers Endgame.
But okay, it's not all Hollywood magic and charming legends. Durham's long history has a much darker side. We're talking stories of war, of starvation, and even a few ghosts.
This is one of the city's grimmest chapters. The cathedral, a place of sanctuary, was turned into a prison. After Cromwell's victory at the Battle of Dunbar, around 3,000 captured Scottish soldiers were marched here and just locked inside. Through a brutal winter, hundreds died of disease and hunger, right there in the house of God.
But in the middle of all that horror, there's this one incredible detail, this small act of defiance. The freezing prisoners, they burned almost everything made of wood just to stay warm. But there was one thing they wouldn't burn, a 15th century clock. Why? Because it had a thistle carved into it, the symbol of Scotland. A tiny piece of their home they refused to let go of.
And the sad stories aren't just from the distant past. The castle is now part of the university, and it's said to be haunted. The ghost is supposedly a student from the 1800s named Frederick Copeman. The story is just heartbreaking. He went to check his exam results, couldn't find his name on the pass list, and in despair he took his own life. The terrible irony? His name wasn't on that list because he'd actually gotten top honors, and that was posted on a separate board.
So you see, Durham's story isn't just about powerful bishops and incredible buildings. Its soul, its identity, has been shaped by so many different kinds of people, from ancient saints and legendary scholars to, in more recent times, the tough, hard-working mining communities of the Northeast.
And this comparison just perfectly captures the two sides of Durham. On one hand, you have the bishop's throne. It's a symbol of old-world aristocratic power, so grand, in fact, that the bishop who built it supposedly made it higher than the Pope's throne. And then, on the other hand, you have the Miners' Gala. It's this huge, loud, vibrant celebration of working-class culture and unity, and it still draws over 200,000 people to the streets every single year.
And the list of characters who've walked these streets is just wild. You've got St. Cuthbert, the humble saint whose body was supposedly found perfectly preserved centuries after he died. You've got the Venerable Bede, literally the father of English history, whose bones are in the cathedral. And then you get the eccentric ones, like Bishop Anthony Beck, who apparently owned a pet polar bear and would walk it along the river. And you can't forget William van Mildert, the very last Prince Bishop. His final act of power, he gave his castle away to start Durham University.
So in the end, Durham is a city of contradictions, isn't it? It was founded because of a humble saint, but it became a fortress for warrior bishops. It's a place of quiet study that was once a horrific prison. It's this ancient symbol of authority that now hosts this massive festival of working-class pride. It makes you wonder, when saints, soldiers, scholars, and miners all leave their mark on the same small patch of land, what story do the stones really tell?